The first round of U.S.-Iran talks wraps up with what Qatar and Pakistan call encouraging progress. A 60-day roadmap is now in place with technical teams staying on in Switzerland through the week. Live from Singapore, this is Insight with Haslinda Amin, where we dive deeper into the stories that matter with crucial context and sharp analysis. Asian stocks rally while oil pairs earlier gains after Washington and Tehran agree on a path toward a final deal. Tech leads the advance. Crude slips below $80 a barrel. Former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta joins us as tensions between Trump and Meloni put Italy-US ties in focus. That comes as disruption in the Strait of Hormuz added to Europe's energy and security challenges. Precious Shipping Managing Director Khalid Hashim joins us to discuss how his firm is navigating the reopening of the strait as the industry weighs security risks and rising insurance costs.
The reason I care about skiing is that it essentially synthesizes all of the values and reflects back to me those values that I judge myself by, right? And so everybody has a set of values by which they define success.
And we hear from Chinese triple Olympic gold medalist Eileen Gu about how she defines success, her brand partnerships, and her future beyond skiing. That exclusive conversation coming right up. Our top story today, oil prices falling while gold and stocks jump on signs of progress in talks between the U.S. and Iran. The first high-level meeting between the two parties opened in the Swiss resort of Birkenstock with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in attendance. Mediators, Qatar and Pakistan say both sides have made encouraging progress in talks on a peace deal and will continue technical-level discussions for the rest of the week. The developments come despite a rocky start to negotiations after President Trump on Sunday renewed his threat to strike Iran if Hezbollah continued attacking Israel. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg Middle East correspondent Aber Abu Omar in Dubai. And Aber, where do talks go from here, especially on Tehran's nuclear program?
Good morning, Haslinda. So according to the joint statement that we got from Qatar and Pakistan, we are set to see a continuation of the talks until the end of this week. Now, we had earlier statements that suggested that once the Sunday talks were over, the delegations will head back. But now what we're hearing from, again, the joint statement by Qatar and Pakistan is that there has been encouraging progress where a lot of concessions were discussed during the meeting that took place yesterday and into the early hour of this morning. And so we're set to see more of these details discussed in the upcoming week or so. Some of the things that were mentioned, according to a foreign minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, who posted on X earlier on, he posted about some of the frozen assets being released for Iran, some of the oil sanctions being waived, and then one of the most important details that he had mentioned is that there was some real tangible progress on the Lebanon situation. And Haslinda, the talks had started at a rocky place in the beginning with the Iran delegation headed to Switzerland and President Trump threatening to hit them if they continue funding their ally Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. That led the Iranian delegation to say that they're closing down the Strait of Hormuz, still headed to the talks. So quite a confusing start to the beginning of all of this. But again, according to the mediators, and those were Qatar and Pakistan, some high-level officials headed from there, they say that the progress is encouraging. A high-level committee was established where the top negotiators will report to this high-level committee over the next 60 days or so.
Aber, you talk about Lebanon. Where are we with that issue? Because we know that, there's been an escalation of activity between the two sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is due to a third party being involved, and that's Israel, Haslinda, which maintains its hostilities in Lebanon. Hezbollah, the militant group that is backed by Iran, fires back at those hostilities as well. So it was a sticking point, a major sticking point for Iran, a part of the negotiations. President Trump did say that he needs to figure out an end to the situation in Lebanon. He even alluded to Syria and the president there, Ahmed al-Sharia, getting involved in that situation in Lebanon. And so it still is very much on the table. What we heard from the joint statement is that both sides have agreed to creating a de-conflicting cell. I don't know how the details of that will work out or how it will be carried through. But again, what we've heard is that there's some major progress on the Lebanon issue. Not clear if it is due to end anytime soon in terms of the firing back and forth in the southern part of Lebanon, that only last week, by the end of last week, was still seeing some casualties on both the Israeli side and the Lebanese side. But we wait and see what the end of that looks like and whether it'll actually end, because according to Iran, if that situation does not cease, it may cause a very big deterioration in the trajectory of these talks for the next 60 days that are set to see also an end or a pledge by Iran to not develop a nuclear weapon. So still some unclarity. Haslinda, we've been talking about this unclarity for weeks at this point, but at least some of those concessions or some of those clauses in the MOU are actually being actively addressed.
Aber, thank you. Bloomberg Middle East correspondent Aber Abu Omar for us in Dubai. Let's get more insights on the Iran war and other geopolitical risks with our next guest. Enrico Letta is a former Italian Prime Minister and now Dean of the IE School of Politics, Economics and Global Affairs. Enrico, good to have you with us. We heard from Aber that we're still reading the tea leaves on the situation with Iran. Are there prospects for a lasting peace? How are you reading the 60-day roadmap?
I think it is fundamental to get peace, fundamental for many reasons, humanitarian, first of all, but also for economic reasons. This crisis is the worst crisis, on energy. It was worse than 73 and 79 together jointly, and just for 60 days of big crisis. So inflation is rising everywhere in Europe. Inflation is rising, and inflation is always bringing bad news on the rest, on economic growth, but also on social big disruptions. So we need peace. This is my point. And I don't know if these agreements will bring peace that can be really a very lasting.
Do you see a frozen war? I mean, like what we're seeing in Ukraine?
I see the potential of a frozen conflict with resurgences, but for a very simple reason that I don't see Trump able to stop Netanyahu. That is so clear, that Netanyahu has his own agenda, and the agenda of Netanyahu is totally different from the agenda that the rest of the world has, and also the agenda of Trump. But Trump is not able to stop him. I think there's a convergent interest from Iran side, US side, Europe, and all the rest of the Middle East actors. But I don't know if they will be able to convince Netanyahu to stop. This is my point. And big worries for the future, yes.
Energy security has been a key issue for Europe, in particular on the back of the Iran war. With signs that the Strait of Hormuz is reopening, does that mark the end of the energy crisis?
It's the, I would say, demonstration of a big problem we have in Europe. We are too much dependent, and we have to be independent on energy. We need to have renewables, and we need to have interconnections among us. This is why the creation of an energy union. As we have the currency union, we have the same currency in Europe, it works. We have to do the same on energy, on connectivity, on financial markets. Because if we depend on Middle East, Russia, US, China, this is not a good news for us for the future. So we need to be independent. We need to have more renewables. Some countries have. We need to have nuclear. Countries have. but we need to be interconnected among us. So we need to depend each other, and then the European integration can work on that.
There's been so much talk about pulling back on Europe's dependence on the US, not just in terms of energy, but defense and so on and so forth. Yet, we're seeing that slow-moving, I guess, approach towards that independence. What's really holding Europe back? There's no acceleration, despite the war in Iran.
In reality, an acceleration happened after Greenland. You know the crisis in Greenland, end of January, 1st of February. In this crisis, the European countries understood that it was necessary to be more independent. From this moment, a big acceleration, the approval from the European Council, Commission and Parliament of the plan One Europe, One Market. This plan is trying to create Europe independent on financial markets, the creation of the Savings and Investments Union, on connectivity, being independent on connectivity, on telecom, and energy union. And adding also this idea of creating a European corporate law, because today we have the national corporate laws, but 27 countries is not easy for someone investing from abroad. So the idea that we presented, a sort of 28 regime, so a 28 virtual state, an optional corporate law regime for companies, a sort of European Delaware, if I can use an example that can. And the European Commission presented this idea in April. Now it is an idea that is taking big interest, attracting big interest. So just to tell you that something is happening in Europe on that, the acceleration is there, and the demonstration is the fact that we intervened on how to save Ukraine financially. The decision to give them 92 billion euros per year for the next 2 years, only a European decision in an independent way, and the big decision on trade. We opened in 5 months 5 trade agreements. We signed 5 trade agreements: India, Indonesia, Australia, Mexico, Mercosur, more than in the last 10 years. So I see an acceleration, Europe more proactive. Of course, it's complicated because we are 27.
It's also forcing a reset in Europe's relations with China.
Yes, it is.
It is complicated.
It is complicated, but I have no doubt that Europe and China have to find a way to have a peaceful coexistence and also positive cooperation. It's in the interest of both. I think it's in the interest of multilateralism too. In these very days, there's a decision on the next Secretary General of the UN, and Europe, China have to discuss about it, to find solutions, and how to cooperate on the industrial side, on innovation. I think there's a common interest. It's not easy. We need reciprocity.
Right.
This is why in the One Europe, One Market plan there is this Industrial Accelerator Act that is a tool to defend European preference when there is not reciprocity on the other side. We ask reciprocity to the Chinese.
Enrico, I want to talk about transatlantic relations. There seems to be a widening gap, and we saw that on the back of that photo between President Trump and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Trump insisted that Prime Minister Meloni forced him to take that photo. Take a listen to what she had to say.
I have no idea why the US president behaves like this with his allies, as it is not the first time that this has happened. What I can say is that it's a shame he doesn't seem to have the same resolve with his enemies of the West, enemies of the United States, or with leaders with whom he seems to be much more condescending. One thing he needs to remember though, Italy and I never beg.
How are you reading this really open and public spat between Trump and Meloni? Meloni used to be seen as a Trump whisperer.
I expected this evolution because it is clear that with Trump you can be a waiter or you can be an interlocutor if you are strong on your positions and defending your positions and without looking to, I don't know, which kind of... and it is clear that for Europe, we need to be united in front of Trump. being divided, everyone trying to have his own bridge with Trump, it doesn't work. We are, I would say, we are weak if we are fragmented in the relationship with Trump. The only way is to be united. He wants to impose tariffs. We respond all united, and he can't. He has to stop.
But the thing is, her response, her move, carries that exact risk of tariffs. It could get to 100%, 200%. Is Europe prepared for that?
I don't think so, for a very simple reason that Trump threatened tariffs like that, but when the retaliation is a European-wide retaliation, he's obliged to stop. He did the same with France, he did the same with other countries, then he was stopped. So you're right, this is the usual Trump approach, but the Europeans, they have to react together. So my key point is that what happened with Italy, in my view, is a very interesting and positive signal. It's a demonstration that the Europeans, they have to react together. They have to stand together because our interests are common. There are differences among the European countries, but our common interests are more important than our differences.
But the question is, what leverage does Europe have in its negotiations, in its relations with the US?
I think we have a big, big leverage. The most important one is our unity on trade. On trade, Europe united is
a region that relies on the US for defense and security. That's also a big issue.
Yes, and we decided to be alone, and to be alone defending Ukraine, for instance. That was for me a big, very important reaction. The fact that we decided to support Ukraine, even without the American support. What we did on financial aid to Ukraine is incredible. I think Trump didn't expect the fact that we decided 92 billion euros European euro debt. That was, I would say, some months ago impossible to predict. For 2 years, I think is the reason why today Ukraine is resisting to Russia. And it's, in my view, a very important signal to Trump too, to say, hey, the Europeans, you can't divide them, even if you wish and if you think you can do it. But at the end of the day, the European interests are bigger than the rest. You remember Greenland. Greenland was, in my view, the biggest mistake from the Trump's administration, but Greenland crisis brought European leaders all together, very determined today to stay together and to stand.
Even as you talk about a European Union that is together, 27 nations moving in line, it is still a fragmented region. I mean, some argue that they're willing to do things, reform, move in that single market, as long as their own champions are not hurt. There's a line that they draw somewhere.
Yes, but I underline the importance, for instance, of what we did on monetary side. The euro today is a success. For many years we had the idea and the question, is the euro resisting or not? Today the euro is a success. The euro is gaining ground and is the demonstration that when we are together we are able to be stronger. If we are separated, so in my view is a topic of awareness of the European leaders, and Trump is playing a fantastic role for Europe. He's playing the role of the biggest federator of the European countries.
The catalyst.
He's a fantastic external catalyst from abroad, because all the European leaders, no matter they are from the right, from the left, from the center, from a more frugal country, a more pro-European country, they are all today convinced that we need to be independent and more united. I can tell you that 2 years ago it was not like that.
So we can see a single market, a united Europe by 2030, 2035. Those are some of the timelines that have been thrown out there.
I hope before. The plan One Europe, One Market has deadlines until 28. So end of this year, end of next year. The proposal of the name of the proposal is EU Inc., EU-INC, this 28 regime, a corporate law that is united for the entire European countries. The agreement is supposed to arrive at the end of this year, and the same for all the other agreements. Savings and Investments Union is the new name of the project of unifying financial markets in Europe. The agreement, we expect the agreement next year. It's an existential challenge for Europe. We need to stay together because it is clear that the rest of the world is dealing with us if we are together. If we are fragmented, separated, they will try to divide us and to, I would say, make Europe weaker. If we stay together, we can defend our interests as we are showing in Ukraine, for instance.
You were the Prime Minister of Italy at a very challenging time economically as well as politically. Italy as a whole has been a political chaos for a very long time, and now that seems that title is going to the UK, which is seeing, a leadership revolving door. What do you make of the situation in the UK? Is that perhaps in the way of resetting relations between the UK and Europe?
I think I always thought that for Europe, independence is not just a 27 topic, is a pan-European topic. I see a fundamental role for the UK, fundamental role for Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, even Turkey plays a role in that on defense, but not only on defense. So I think that with the UK we have to reopen discussion, negotiation, not to have the UK on board again as 28th EU member. I don't think so. But
that's not on the cards, not a possibility. But 10 years on.
Not because of us. I think because of them. It is complicated to think that they will come back to 2016. But in this 10th anniversary, we are exactly in the days of the 10th anniversary of Brexit. We have to clearly say that Brexit was the worst disaster that happened in Europe in this century in political terms. It was a political disaster for them and for us. It was a problem for European strength. It would be totally different today, being again together with London, financial capital of the entire pan-European continent. So my guess, reopening discussion to have a UK European Union agreement, not only on defense, but also on other important aspects. I hope also that the UK will have stable politics, but I would like to say that their chaos started with Brexit. After Brexit, it was a chaos. It was a chaos politically and also economically. So it was not a good choice. It was a very bad choice.
Are there repercussions in the political chaos in the UK on Europe? How do you see the ripple effects, I suppose, from developments in the UK?
I think there's a lot of topics. The most important one, on my view, is the financial side, because being divided means, I would say, helping the American finance to be stronger, because at the end of the day, New York will attract investments that are not arriving in Europe, because Europe is divided. So this is why I hope this plan to have a more united European financial market can involve also a new relationship with London and opening a new phase of a European strength on that. It's not just that, there's also all the technological part of the discussion. Is it possible to start, I would say, between the UK and the European Union, a new plan, projects, ideas, how to finance AI, how to finance innovation. We are too much depending on the US on that, and we can't think that only US and China can be champions of AI. We, the Europeans, all together, we can be champions of AI. When we were in another world in the 90s, when China was very small, when India was very small, we, the Europeans, we were champions of the big innovation of that time, the mobile. We were selling mobiles everywhere in the world. Today we are buying technology. Why? Because we are fragmented. So this is why in the plan One Europe, One Market, the topic of integration to scale up. The big word is scaling up.
But when it comes to AI, it is no doubt that the US and China right now are the leaders. I mean, we talk about the decoupling of the two impacting the rest of the world. How do you see Europe making its way to that leadership role? And how soon do you think that might happen realistically?
You know why they are the leaders? Not because they have the best competences. Many European engineers are working in the US today to help the big American achievements. The key point is the magnitude of the financial investments they were able to put on this side. On the Chinese side, mostly public money. On the US side, mostly private money. This is why I attach such an important strategic on the integration of financial markets in Europe. If we are able to have an integrated, big European financial market, more attractive with simpler rules, then we can have also this scale up in the magnitude of investment that today we don't have because of the fragmentation of the markets.
It's not just fragmentation of the markets, but fragmentation of the world. It is a very different geopolitical environment today than it was maybe just 5 years ago. What are you telling your students about how they should prepare, how they should be viewing the world?
First of all, our students on public policy, on policy sciences, governance, we try to teach them at IE that they have to bridge silos, not silos, divided silos, separated, but they have to bridge. For instance, social sciences and hard sciences, they are no more, I would say, separated words. If you deal on AI, on tech, on climate change, on pandemics, at the end of the day is both governance topics and at the same time hard sciences topics. It's very complicated today to train people to be only one of the two words. You need to give them the goodwill to understand something of the two. And in my view is the most fascinating part of the future, because my generation was trained to be one or the other.
Enrico, love having you here. Thank you so much for today. Enrico Letta, former Italian Prime Minister and Dean of IE School of Politics, Economics and Global Affairs. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Millions of barrels of oil flowed through the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend, even after Iran claimed to have closed the waterway again. 5 oil supertankers with a combined transport capacity of 8 million barrels were seen entering or traveling inside the strait via a route that hugs Oman's coast. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg oil reporter Nicholas Loa. Talk to us about what's in play at the moment. What actually are we seeing at the Strait of Hormuz?
I think despite the incendiary rhetoric we saw over the weekend, the physical flows clearly didn't agree. We saw, indeed, as you've mentioned, up to 8 million barrels transiting the strait. So 3 oil supertankers, VLCCs, and 2 Suezmaxes. And these were flowing through the Omani route, right? And the interesting thing about the Omani route is that's the one that US forces have said they've been able to defend and through which they've been able to preserve flows. I think the US count is slightly higher than what we've seen, something like 17 million barrels through the strait. And I think that suggests that some of these ships are going dark, switching off their GPSs early in order to bypass. And it's not just that side of the route, Haslinda, that we've seen flows. We've also seen cargoes go through the Iranian-approved routes, suggested to have gone through the Iranian-approved routes. And these 3 tankers connected with India seem to have made that route. They disappeared over the weekend and they're reappearing outside, as we've seen.
The thing is, when you take a look at oil prices today, I mean, there's hesitance. Right? People do not know what to make of what really is happening, especially on the back of the talks between US and Iran and Switzerland. I mean, how will that impact flows and prices?
If I were a ship owner right now, I'd be really, really cautious. And I think some of the people in our newsroom have also pointed at that. The Chubb CEO talked about how shipping transit security through Hormuz right now is still an hour-by-hour play. And this is from a guy who, together with Lloyd's of London, announced plans on last Friday for insurance for shipping through the strait. Right. So I think even as many signs point towards a reopening, there's still plenty of caution. Let me remind everybody, of course, that we've seen Iranian media talk about threatened, like say that the strait will close over the weekend, only for that to be refuted. And in much the same way, I think there's a lot of like back and forth. And another number to note is like we've basically been in this war for around 4 months now, and the timeline for a more lasting accord is the 60 days we're in, right? And 60 days is basically half of the time we've already been fighting. So plenty of time for things to go wrong.
So 40 days, 60 days, so we're looking at 100 days at least. Nick, thanks. Bloomberg Oil reporter Nicholas Loa there. Now, Chubb CEO Evan Greenberg says U.S. military efforts to open a broader set of shipping channels should support a pickup in activity. But he says that even then, transit security in the Strait of Hormuz will remain volatile.
It's a bit uncertain. It's from day to day, hour to hour. But the U.S. military is providing vigilance and protection to ships that are transiting the straits. It's important that that international waterway, which is important to the world, commerce, be open and transited by ships from all countries. And so we're doing our part to provide protection and certainty in that regard.
Well, Nick wanted a shipping company. We do have a shipping company right now. Our next guest runs a shipping company that provides global dry bulk transportation services for agricultural products, steel, cement, and coal. Joining us exclusively, Khalid Hashim, MD of Precious Shipping. Khalid, how are you assessing the situation in the Strait of Hormuz? Is it really open? How are you assessing the risk?
Well, from the news that we've got from one of our ships, which is inside, it is open and it is not open. It's open because we've got news from the international media that it is open and that there's an agreement in place. But it is not open according to the ship staff because they monitored a couple of days ago before the documentation was signed by the Americans and the Iranian that there was a call made internationally, rather an open broadcast call made on Channel 16, which is the channel used for communication of any sort of emergency, saying that you should not sail through the Straits of Hormuz. That was the Iranian position. So really, we don't know if it's open or not open.
So for you, Khalid, what are the indicators that would suggest that the Strait of Hormuz is really operational? What are you waiting to see? What signs?
First of all, if the Middle East Gulf starts to calm down and there is no further bombing going on in different countries, and the countries are allowed now to get on with their lives, if that starts to happen, if things close down, if the things become better, then I feel that we have a good chance of peace coming in. If peace comes in, 100% the Straits of Hormuz will be open for all.
What's the impact you're seeing on the shipping industry? Is it acting like, perhaps a major disruption can happen anytime soon?
Right now, yes. That's the position. Everybody thinks that this can close down very quickly, and we've seen it close down also very quickly.
And what are you doing on the back of that?
Well, we are in touch with the military authorities run by the Americans. We are in close touch with them. We are trying to find out whether our ship is going to be allowed to sail out or not. So the ship which is stuck inside and has been stuck inside since the 7th of March. So we're waiting for that information. Once they give us a clearance, then we will see whether the Iranian threat is to be believed in or not. And then it'll depend on the ship staff whether they're willing to go ahead with the crossing or not. Of course, all this presupposes that we have a war risk insurance cover in place for the Strait of Hormuz transit.
And Khalid, in the meantime, what are you seeing in, the Cape of Good Hope, the Suez Canal? What kind of activity are we having at these locations?
Okay, so coming to Suez Canal and the Red Sea, we have not been sailing through that place because we're very risk averse as a corporate. And we've stopped sailing there since the time Houthis started bombing ships within the Red Sea. We've still not yet restarted our position going through the Red Sea. Now, if we were risk takers, we would have earned on many of our ships that have gone via the Cape of Good Hope an additional $4,000 to $5,000 per day as the risk premium accorded to ships that were willing to transit via the Red Sea. So that tells you
how is it?
What is the... Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Khalid.
No, so that tells you that type of risk profile that we have as a corporate. We are not willing to take such risks, so we will not go in there. Now, when the Gulf War started on the 28th of Feb, it looked like a peace deal was being worked out at that moment in time. And just like in the June position where the peace deal was being worked out and they were trying to get a nuclear settlement done with Iran, they again attacked all of Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, because of that, we didn't know and didn't expect that now the second time that the peace negotiations were going on, that they would actually start bombing. So one of our ships, the Hataya Nari, which is there inside right now, inside the Persian Gulf, she was carrying a cargo of grain going in there, and we did our business and we were ready to take the next cargo out when, of course, all hell broke loose in the Persian Gulf.
So Khalid, on the back of what happened to Mayuri Nari, I mean, where, the incident cost some lives, I'm just wondering, what are some of the lessons learned on the back of that?
The first lesson learned is that we should not take any risk assessment with great seriousness. We should really consider what is the real risk attached. We had got this type of assessment done. It said that your ship is largely safe. Therefore, we took the opportunity to try and make a transit. Now, this was on the 11th of March. According to the risk assessment that we got, we were supposed to transit with AIS on, transit in broad daylight, which we did. And of course, then she got hit and we lost 3 lives in that process. Now, so the lessons learned is that we must get multiple risk assessments done by different corporates that will guide us whether we should or should not take it. Second, as we did in the Mayuri Nari's case, we will get written confirmations from the staff whether they are prepared to sail or not. If we have that written confirmation, as we had in the Mayuri's case, then we will sail the Hataya Nari out, but not otherwise.
Khalid, I want to take a look at the outlook for your business. How much clarity do you have in terms of the outlook for dry shipping in the coming quarters?
Well, if I just look at the start of this year, up to the 28th of Feb, everything was going in one direction, which was up, especially for the geared ships that we run. Then came the 28th of Feb, and for a period of about 2 weeks, all the clients that we had walked away from the market. There was a hiatus created, and as a result of that hiatus, rates started to come down. Once the clients realized that the risk is only limited up to the Hormuz Strait and that the bunker supplies, which had suddenly disappeared, were actually available, and that the bunker prices were highly inflated and they would drop. Once that realization set in, I think most of our clients started, treating it as business as usual. And what we saw is that from that time onwards, after the middle of March, the rates have gone up all the way into a straight line up to, say, for example, at the end of last week, when it ended at $21,700 for the Ultramax ship and ended at $15,800 for the handy-size ships. Now, this is the index ships that we're talking about, and that was the numbers that we saw.
So in terms of supply-demand balance, where are you with that, especially with China's demand stagnating? Do you see that changing in the coming months at all? Again, now we have to differentiate China's demand. If it's demand for creation of steel, which is iron ore and coking coal, then you would find that there are some changes taking place. I think as far as iron ore is concerned, China has always had a just-in-case policy there for all raw materials coming in.
So what they do is that whenever prices are weak, they will buy more of that commodity. Whenever prices go up, they will stop buying that commodity. And this is not linked to whether they're using that commodity to create steel or not. So it is not steel creation or steel demand creation within China or outside China which makes them buy iron ore. Iron ore buying or storing is simply linked to the price of iron ore. So China is pretty smart about this. Now, this is how they operate. So, and this, of course, affects the big ships. That's why if you look at the big ships, from the start of this year, they've been going up and down like a yo-yo. And this is all linked, if you can call it a linkage, is only linked to price. So if you were to take a graph of price and then look at the graph of the Capesize sector, you would find a very, very good match.
Khalid, just one final question before we let you go. What's the outlook for freight rates in the coming year, if you were to hazard a guess?
Okay, so sometimes it's very difficult to make a forecast, especially for the near term, because it's going to be impacted quite seriously by different factors, like geopolitics, over which we have no control and we don't know where it's headed. So I would say if I'm looking at a 3 to 5 year forecast, I would say that the rates will be very strong for longer. Why? Because the supply side on dry bulk ships is running neck and neck with the percentage of ships on order. There is literally no difference between these two numbers: a 20-year-old existing fleet and percentage of the world fleet and the forward order book.
Khalid, thank you so much for your time today. Khalid Hashim, MD of Precious Shipping. Now, here's a look at Indian markets just ahead of the open. Stocks coming online just as the rest of the region weighs progress in peace talks between the U.S. and Iran. Traders also getting the chance to react to the recent move by India's securities regulator to reintroduce open market buybacks for companies. In the pre-market session, we're seeing gains for some of the indexes. Sensex, trading currently down about 0.5% as we speak. In terms of the INR, 94,322 is the level we're looking at. No change there versus the USD. And here's a look at shares of Reliance after the conglomerate announced a much-awaited India IPO of Jio Platforms. The company's draft document didn't specify the potential size of the IPO, but said almost $3 billion of the proceeds will be used for debt reduction. Meanwhile, Mukesh Ambani has told a shareholders meeting his empire will remain undivided, with generational succession almost complete. Let's get to Mumbai and a conglomerate's media and telecom reporter, PR Sanjay. Sanjay, what was the key highlight of Ambani's speech at the AGM?
Thank you, Haslinda. The key highlight of the most awaited speech was filing of for the DRHP, the documents for the share sale of Jio Platforms Limited, which runs India's #1 wireless carrier, which is Reliance Jio Infocomm Limited. And the key thing was it would be the biggest IPO ever India has seen, and it would be raising around $3.94 billion in the dollar worth of money from the market. And another key interesting thing was it will be all primary issue. There's no secondary issue, and this would hit during this calendar year. And Mukesh Ambani said it's a very emotional thing for him, and he specified that his 3 children, Akash, Ishan, Anand, are leading the thing. And this filing came during his speech. He said this will be filed on Friday, and during the speech, the filing came. So it was quite surprised because the market was waiting for the timeline for the IPO, which was slightly delayed, and now he could get that across the shareholders. And they felt very emotional about this IPO, which is coming after 2 decades, Haslinda.
You touched on the issue of succession. It is a key factor for a lot of investors. What exactly did he say about succession?
That was an interesting question. Towards last side of his speech, he clearly reiterated that Reliance Industries will be undivided. And he said almost all the day-to-day operations which has been handed over, and his 3 children, Isha, Akash, and Anand, will be mentored by around 500 executives, which is ranging from ages of 30 to 40, who are there to help him. And once again, drawing instances or experiences experiences from the past, issue which he had with his younger brother Anil Ambani. He clearly said Reliance Industries, India's largest private enterprise, will remain undivided, and the succession is clearly over. He clarified all the doubts at Haslinda.
Is that playing out in terms of its shares? Is it instilling confidence in the company?
Of course, there are two things. One is their succession is very clear. Akash is steering with the IP of Jio Platforms Limited. Isha is trying to quadruple the revenues of Reliance Retail to 10 billion by 2030. And Anand is in the middle of executing his BS battery energy storage system by this year. So all things clear. So there's clarity on the market, clarity on the IPO, and the proceeds will be going for debt reduction, which will help Jio Platform for invest further for the strategic priorities for the company. So the road is clear. Much awaited IPO. Mukesh Ambani made us an emotional speech, and the filing came during the speech, and we are expecting now the road ahead and the timeline for the listing, etc. Haslinda.
Sanjay, thank you. Bloomberg Conglomerate's media and telecom reporter Pierre Sanjay for us in Mumbai. Still ahead, our exclusive interview with six-time Olympic skiing medalist Eileen Gu. Hear her future plans beyond competitive sport. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Six-time Olympic skiing medalist China's Eileen Gu says she's looking at investment opportunities and potentially starting her own company. The most decorated female freestyle skier of all time spoke exclusively to us in Hong Kong. We asked the 22-year-old if she sees herself as a bridge between the cultures of China and the West.
I think it's the other way around, in that I just am who I am, and then the brands that also reflect that will align with me, right? And so I exist in many different places. I travel a lot for training, for, different events. And so I have communities and locations that I feel very connected to all over the world. And so I think it's only natural that I have brand partnerships that reflect that, because that's just who I am.
But what makes you do what you do? I mean, what you do is extraordinary. It's also very risky. You've put yourself in a situation where you've had massive injuries, shoulder, concussion. I mean, for a mom, my God, that must be quite a terrible situation to be in. But you go back to it. What drives you?
I think it's a lot worse for my mom than it is for me. I think you're definitely right on that part. What drives me?
Is it adrenaline?
I don't think I've ever considered quitting. It's just not even, that's just never even crossed my consciousness. So it's hard for me to answer that. I wish I had some kind of punchy thing, but it's just who I am. It's what I do. And I think when you integrate, how about this? The reason I care about skiing is that it essentially synthesizes all of the values and reflects back to me those values that I judge myself by, right? And so everybody has a set of values by which they define success. And so for some people it's beauty, for some people it's influence, for some people it's wealth, all these whatever different avenues, maybe cultural impact, maybe giving back to the community. These are all different things. I define my success by how well I know myself, how hard I'm able to push my boundaries, personal growth. I care about social impact. And so all of those values that I care most about are reflected directly in skiing.
If I were to trail you for a week, what might surprise me?
How little wasted time there is. Generally speaking, nobody can trail us for a week. I say us, my mom and I. Just because you really have to love it and you really have to be invested and engaged in it, because otherwise it will kill you. It is just so exhausting, and there is not one moment that goes wasted. So it's all my meals are eaten in the car. I do all of my prep during hair and makeup. I will simultaneously do multiple interviews and media things in one day. I will squeeze in a workout in the most random time. We have a flight almost every day. I sleep whenever I can. So just little things where you're wow, I didn't realize literally every single moment is spoken for. How much you can pack into a 10-minute window. Something like that, I think, would be most surprising. It's always the little things.
When you think about the future, what's in it for Eileen Gu? People talk about perhaps, you've achieved so much, but the future could hold, the movies, business, entrepreneurship. How do you look at the future for someone who's achieved so much at the top of her game in everything that she's achieved?
I'm investing more now and growing interest in that area alongside mentors of mine and just kind of exploring that niche a little bit more. I'd love to start a company. Those are kind of things that interest me. I'm writing a book right now. I don't really sit still for very long, but I also don't like declaring goals until I meet them. Like, if you go back, you'll never find an interview of me saying I'm going to win the Olympics. Even after I'd already won the first time, there's no interview where I'll ever say, I'm going to do this. I can only say retrospectively, this is what I have done. So yeah, I think that I'm not very good at sitting still and that I will always find a way to fulfill my purpose. Generally speaking, my goal is to make the world a better place. And so the avenues that I take to reach that will naturally evolve with my age and my, wisdom and place in the world.
Triple Olympic freestyle skiing champion Eileen Gu speaking exclusively to Bloomberg. That is it for Insight. Horizons Middle East and Africa is up next. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg.